thanks again for being such a brilliant mentor for Mullany. Can we start then by asking you about being a mentor? What's it like and what do you do?
Yeah, it's really good. Uh it basically involves that you're paired up with either sort of one to I think the maximum is sort of three at a push, but that's all very discretionary. Sort of 13 to 18-year olds, either going through sort of GCSEs or A levels, and then you're sort of just providing them guidance on sort of what they want to do. And I think Molly is quite good at pairing you generally with people who are sort of either interested in your career or your career space. So I think as a medical doctor, I've had pretty much all of the mentees I've had, bar maybe two, have been sort of either interested in applying to medicine, actively applying to medicine, or just sort of thinking about lots of different STEM careers, medicine being one of them, and just sort of wanting a bit of guidance about that. So yeah, and it sort of involves you anonymously talking to them through this chat platform a couple times a week at most, sort of going through any questions they have. And sort of it can be sort of in some ways as engaged or as frequent or as infrequent as you can allow, and also as much as the student wants really out of it. So I think Mullany sends sort of these weekly quite good sort of guides, which are sort of here's our week of I think every now and then it's a weekly career, so marine biologist or something else like that, or different study tips basically, and that can be sort of a good starting off point if you're quite stuck what to engage with your student with. But usually usually the students are pretty engaged, and if they're not, um, then they'll usually be able to find you someone else. But usually the students are usually pretty engaged with that because they have to sign up, not have they're choosing to sign up for it. So
Yes, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, you mentioned the kind of prompts that come both for the benefit for the mentor and the mentee in order to keep the conversation flowing. Great. What brought you to Mullany mentoring particularly? I mean, I'm going to guess within your career, of course, you will have had experience of mentoring and being mentored, but why did you actually sign up with Mullany specifically?
I think when I was 15 and applying, talking about applying to med school, I think I signed up to Mullany for one thing, and I think I was paired with a biologist actually, and that was just helpful just to sort of see the different career options and the different questionnaires and things we could talk about. I think that's part of it, but I do really like Mullany in the sense that I'm partly because I've been involved in other mentoring programs which are really good, but haven't quite had the sustainability of lasting as long as Mullany has. To be honest, I think
Mm,
over I know, I mean, I did it when I was six, so it'll be about 8 years at least, and sort of
mm,
I've done others which have been very good, but they've sort of run out of steam because it is quite difficult to keep these sorts of things going because you constantly need new students and new mentors. So I think Mullen's got quite a sustainable model, just looking from the outside, which means sort of I'm quite happy to keep signing up for it because I know that it's going to keep going. And also I do really like the anonymous chat aspect of it. I think that's quite a nice way to allow you to have students be as engaged or less engaged as they sort of want to be. And I think sort of it's quite nice for more anxious students or more students who have more going on at home to be able to sort of dip in and out and not
mm,
necessarily need to have the commitment that I think sometimes if you have more, if you had more of a calls-based thing, they have to put time aside. Whereas the fact that it's asynchronous and sort of anonymous means that they can sort of dip in and out as they
yeah.
see fit and as they can, really. So I think it's quite good, good for that. And as said already, they sort of Molyneux do quite a good job of pairing me personally with people who are interested in medicine, which is quite rewarding in being able to help them specifically um, go towards that. Or I mean, sometimes find that it's not for them, but at least guide them towards somewhere more where they're going to have a more fulfilling career and future, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've always already touched a little bit about the fact that the whole concept of the program really is to make sure that the access is as smooth as possible, both for the sort of learners that we're talking about, but also for people who are in careers. I mean, that's what the learners actually appreciate is that you're actually working in the field. And of course, that means your time is very precious. So yeah, I think that's an interesting observation about the fact that it's flexible and you can actually send a text when you're ready, and so can they. Um, is there anything else you want to say about sort of time commitments then? I mean, you've said once or twice a week. Generally, it doesn't feel too onerous.
Yeah, I would definitely say. I think, as I said, I mean, it depends on the mentee in terms of how much they reply, but I think broadly, um, even with busy sort of on-call weeks, broadly, you can sort of manage to put 5 minutes aside just to send them a message or something, or sometimes set expectations and say, actually, I'm not going to be that available this week, but we'll catch up again next week.
Yeah,
And broadly, I think for a lot of the students who are doing this sort of thing, it can be as engaged as you have the time commitment for, and I don't think there's any sort of negative to if you're only able to send 1 or 2 messages a week, then that's usually pretty fine because they're also sort of
yeah,
they're busy in the sense of being, students figuring out, life and things like that. So
yeah, of
you
course.
usually only get a couple, I
Yeah,
think I've had two mentees who are very engaged, who sort of I was probably doing a bit more with in terms of like messaging multiple times a week, but most of them I tend to do only they tend to reply twice a week. I tend to reply twice a week at a maximum, and that usually only takes about 5-10 minutes a week, and
yeah,
that's pretty manageable to be honest. And also they have designed quite an easy to use application version of the website for them. So it means actually sometimes that if I've got a spare 5 minutes in a coffee break or something and no one's about, then I can just sort of format a message and send it from my phone, which does mean that they get
yeah,
it makes it much easier to actually use the app and do the mentoring and things like that. I'd say it's not a
yeah.
particularly I wouldn't say it's really a time commitment at all, and you can always obviously feedback if you're finding that, say, you've been given 2 mentees and that's too much, then I'm sure it's pretty flexible to go down and things like
Yeah,
that. So
definitely.
I think it's very very manageable to be honest.
Great, thank you. I mean, in terms of your mentees, then, I mean, we know, I mean, because obviously through exit surveys, we know very well what they're telling us about what they really appreciate. And I think part of that, actually, they really appreciate even getting a small amount of a real working doctor or engineer's time. From what you're seeing, in terms of the sorts of questions they're asking, what do you think that they get out of it? What do you think the kind of benefits from as you know, from on the other side of the phone for the actual mentees themselves?
I think it's broadly the benefits they're getting is like you say about that sort of working perspective. I think for a lot of them,
Mm,
I think Mullany does a very good job of guiding a lot more of the career stuff, so that we don't have to think about it as much. But sort of like sending good career quizzes, prompting questions, things like that, to talking about
mm,
smart targets and other sort of things which are just useful for students to know in general. But I think the main thing they get from Mullany, which they don't necessarily get from school or other things, is just that um, day in the life sort of
yeah,
being able to ask questions. And I also think sometimes I remember being as like a student, or even now that I'm thinking about specializing and things like that, is sometimes you just want to be able to talk to someone in that specialty or whatever for 5 minutes and just ask sort of the random questions which you don't necessarily think, so the random questions that just pop into your mind that aren't like going to be common questions online or things like that. So I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's quite a good use of it is just that day in the life aspect
yeah,
of it, and being able to I think it's also useful just to have people who've gone through the application process for the sort of particularly the A-level students, so you can sort of reassure them that someone else has done it as well and got to that career goal or whatever, and that sort of thing. I think that's quite
yeah,
useful for them as well to be able to
yeah.
see that.
Yeah, brilliant. And then for new mentors, then, what have you found in your armory now? Because you've been with us a good while, as you've said, which is much appreciated. Um, do you think there are particular tips you've got about making sure that the mentee sort of settles into it? Because for some of them, it'll be the very first time, really. I mean, it's really good practice in terms of speaking in a professional, semi-professional way with somebody that they don't know. Yeah, have you got any tips about making sure mentees get the best out of things?
I think in terms I think partly I always like to have a little bit of, again, I sound like a broken record, but Molly does do a really good job of those weekly themes, which then help them to guide the conversation to sort of a more practical aspects. I think I like to sort of, in terms of applying for medicine, because it's quite a specific application process, I quite like to sort of say to them that, over the weeks we'll discuss sort of a couple of different themes, but that if they have any specific questions or anything like that, then just putting that out there just to say, if you have any questions at all at any time, just send them and that's fine. I think that's a good way to get them to sort of ask questions, is sort of making them feel reassured that, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah.
I think the other thing would be the let's train of thought, sorry.
Don't worry.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, just touching on what you said about sort of the professionalism aspect, I think I think broadly, I think this is quite specific, but I suppose I just like to always send a message, start off in a friendly tone, have quite a friendly manner throughout, but I always sort of sign off as though it's sort of writing an email, and I think that's sort of something which I've seen them sort of then imitate later on, and I think it's a good way to sort of get them thinking about how they professionally communicate and things like that. Not only because it's useful for the future, but also just with sort of the, back when I was younger, most of your communication, you wouldn't really sort of start writing emails or texts until you're a bit older. But now they're sort of doing it from sort of day dot. It's sort of, they learned a sort of quite colloquial and informal way of speaking. And I think this is a nice sort of safe space to sort of, you don't need to challenge them on it to tell them, you have to message in this way, but it's a nice way sort of be, role modeling in that sense.
Yeah, you're modeling a way of communication, as you say, and it's getting the right balance, isn't it, between being friendly and approachable, and at the same time saying, well, actually, no, I'm a kind of professional contact here, and that's kind of purposeful. Brilliant. Okay, I'm sure everybody will find that really, really useful. So thanks for those tips. Yeah, thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.